All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of Before the Sandstorm. It's week 2. South Carolina taking on Arkansas today at noon Eastern time, 12 o'clock local time in Fayetteville, Arkansas. First road game of the season, first SEC matchup of the season. And Wes, we've got a little bit different of a version of Before the Sandstorm today. We're meeting virtually, but we're still talking all about South Carolina. So are you ready for the game today?
I am ready. A different vibe today. I gotta admit, it's not quite like sitting on the top of that cockaboose over there and hanging out, and the birds were chirping, and it was a good time. But yeah, I'm excited. SEC opener. It feels a little bit weird, playing Arkansas. Like, this is not a team South Carolina has played in recent years. I feel like we've kind of had to dive in a little bit this week and learn a little bit more about them than maybe most weeks where we already have a little bit of background knowledge about the teams, but. Tough game, obviously, for South Carolina. I think all Gamecock fans sort of have accepted that, but also a big opportunity for them as well.
So you talk about it being a big opportunity, and leading up to the season, you and I talked so many times. What is that most important game for South Carolina on the schedule this year? Is it Arkansas? Is it Kentucky? Is it Tennessee? And I think this game in particular, it allows South Carolina maybe the opportunity to kind of set the tone. Last week, a lot of fans disappointed, especially in the offense, because I think they felt like they saw a lot of the similar problems that were plaguing the Gamecocks last year. So heading into this game, Wes, obviously it would be a massive win for South Carolina, but what do the Gamecocks need to do to stay in this game with the number 16 ranked team in the nation that had a breakout year last year and quite frankly is looking this year to capitalize off of that?
Yeah, and their breakout year last year was not a fluke. Kendall is the other big thing. Like, you look at some of the teams they beat. They beat Texas A&M by 10 points last year. That is a team we saw, just dominate South Carolina. So, they played toe to toe with Alabama, who obviously went on to play for and lose to Georgia in the national championship. So it was not one of these fluky, they just beat a lot of teams that were down. They had some really nice wins last year. So it's going to be a situation where South Carolina, for one, they've got to play well. Like, I think that obviously kind of goes without saying for a lot of games. But what I mean by that is, South Carolina did not have to play their best game to beat Georgia State. Like, it was a week 1. They could go out there. They could have some mistakes. You could have some issues on offense, and you still end up winning the game, and actually ended up, even though you can't tell it on the message boards or Twitter this week, they did win the game handily by the end. So, I think what I mean by that is you've got to play not a perfect game by any means. There's not many perfect games out there, but you've got to play a little bit closer to your best, eliminate some of your issues, be a little bit more efficient. And, Mark Satterfield said it this week, got to run the football, elephant in the room. But I think some of what you're going to see this week is also going to be about getting Spencer Rattler outside the pocket, creating some opportunities in the passing game, because this is an Arkansas team. Their weakness is against the pass. So, yeah, we've talked about the run game all week long, Kendall, but South Carolina's got to make a lot of progress, I think, today, or have a lot of production today, I should say, in the passing game.
Yeah, and a lot of people talking about that offensive productivity that they want to see today, but Arkansas has a very good offense themselves. So also considering South Carolina's defense, yes, I think last week more people were happier with the defense than they were the offense, but you've got a quarterback in KJ Jefferson who had a fantastic week last week. He came into this season with the second best interception to touchdown ratio out of all SEC quarterbacks. He's very talented. Then you've got some other really, really talented players. Trey Knox, a tight end for Arkansas. Raheem Sanders, who could be a big problem for South Carolina in terms of the ground game if the offensive line isn't able to block and they aren't able to improve from what we saw last week. And I think so many people are perplexed by it. I don't want to get too much into the offensive line because I do want to talk more about key players, what you're expecting. But I think people are perplexed because last year they would see flashes like against Florida and against Auburn and against UNC. And they're like, we saw those moments against those teams, especially teams like Auburn that made a bowl game. But when you play Georgia State, you don't see that. So what would you say to somebody who's confused about why there's such an inconsistency there?
Yeah, I mean, for one, I would probably say I'm right there with you. Like I don't have the answers. I think a lot of us were expecting it to look a little bit different as far as the productivity goes this past week, and I think there was a little element there of Georgia State being a team that is a little bit undersized up front. They do a lot of different things up front. They move their guys around, slant them, stunt them, stuff like that. And sometimes when you have a big sort of SEC sized line that is kind of built to block similarly sized SEC linemen, it can work against you a little bit when you're out there trying to block guys that are like 6 foot tall and 270. Because they're a little bit quicker. They're obviously shorter. They can kind of get underneath where you would normally be putting your hands, and it can create some issues. So that, Kendall, would be like the glass half full answer. Kind of like, all right, it wasn't great. It was kind of ugly at times, but maybe this week they're a little bit more in tune to kind of to block Arkansas, and it's a different test. Sometimes you rise to the occasion of your opponent's level of talent as well. So the other side, like the concern, is just like like you said, like everybody else has said, just seeing some of the same things we all saw last year. And I think you kind of thought, or at least me personally, I thought the single biggest issue last year was new scheme, new system. The guys looked to me like they were a little bit hesitant because they just weren't quite comfortable in what they were being asked to do yet. I figured fast forward an entire year, another full off season, I thought that would be a big difference. And, let's call it like it is. It really wasn't. But I also am not the person to jump the gun on one game. You can't really entirely put all of last year on what is a new team this year. So we will learn a lot today, Kendall. I think we're going to be saying, here it is again, or the Gamecock group chats, group texts everybody has going during the game. They'll be saying, wait, where was this last week? We're actually creating some space and getting Marshawn Lloyd and CBS some room in there.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. You can't use that excuse anymore of it's the first game and they're shaking off the first game jitters and they, are just kind of getting back into it. That's not the case anymore, especially when you're playing a team like Arkansas, an extremely difficult opponent to face on the road, especially in the second week of the year, your first SEC game of the season. But Wes, last week we saw some players really stand out. Nick Eamon being one of those players, a freshman. Spencer Rattler had some great moments. He was running for his life sometimes, but he did a pretty good job extending plays. Shane Beamer talked about it this week for the game. Who are your key players for South Carolina? Who needs to show out in this game against Arkansas for the Gamecocks to put themselves in the best position to win?
Yeah, I think Spencer's like the obvious, so I won't go too deep into him. Like that's just like I think going to be a given, maybe in a lot of games this year for South Carolina. Arkansas secondary has struggled. There'll be opportunities to hit big plays in the passing game. Cincinnati, watching that game, they had chances to hit big plays, but they have a new quarterback, missed some throws that were there. And it's probably, honestly, a completely different game. We're probably talking about Arkansas being 0-1 right now if they could have hit some of those available passes. I'd never heard this analogy before. The announcer said basically that's like in baseball, a long foul ball, like when you hit a home run, but it's foul. And that just kind of clicked with me. I was like, it's an excellent way to describe it. It's because, all right, he made great contact. You hit the ball, 375 feet, but it doesn't matter because it's a foul ball and actually it's a strike. So quarterback, you did everything else right, but you barely missed the throw. And guess what? Now it's third down. So I thought that was really, really good. South Carolina needs to have their home runs be fair and over the fence today. But my non-Spencer Rattler answer, let's go Mo Kaba. We talked about Mo a ton in the offseason. Thought he had a really good debut as a starter last week. But, you talked about him in the open. KJ Jefferson is like the key to Arkansas's attack. So the Carolina linebackers in general, but I feel like Mo's kind of the leader of that group now. They are going to be in a position to where they're constantly having to worry about him running, constantly making them think he's going to run and then throwing the ball. It's kind of going to be like a little back and forth all day long. So can they contain KJ Jefferson today, to me, is like the biggest key to this game. And I do, from what I've heard, I think Sherrod Green will be back in there as well in the rotation. We'll see how much he plays, but from what I've heard, I think he'll at least be available and in the rotation today. So Carolina should have some depth at linebacker that they feel pretty good about today.
I mean, it's going to be one of those situations, I think, for South Carolina, like you said, where they have to play well at every point of the game. I mean, of course, you're going to have little moments that happens with every single team, but they're going to have to consistently play well throughout. Hopefully, special teams able to recreate some of what they did last week, too. I think South Carolina needs all the help they can get in every area. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't mean that in a rude way. It's just based off of what we saw last week. And yes, Georgia State, this is the other thing. I think people were expecting South Carolina to steamroll Georgia State. They were expecting an Eastern Illinois type of situation from week one. Georgia State was not a cupcake. Shane Beamer said it tons of times. Yes, they're a mid-major school. Yes, they are not in a Power 5 conference, but they're going to compete for their conference title. They've had some pretty good years over the past few seasons. So beating them by 21 points, it might not seem that great. And the final score, I don't think necessarily reflected what a lot of fans saw, especially in that first half. But South Carolina, if you think about it, like just what that whole game had to offer, there were spots of it that I think people aren't necessarily paying attention to that were a little bit better for South Carolina than one might think. But Wes, I want to talk a little bit about score predictions before we get out of here. I know that we put them over on Gamecock Central. So if you haven't been over there already, go to GamecockCentral.com. Colin Taylor is actually on the road in Fayetteville, Arkansas today. So he's going to have all of the live updates, everything. But we had our game predictions in. So I want to hear your game prediction, Wes.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. I picked Arkansas to win. I think I put 31-27. I had been that number has just been speaking to me all week long, Kendall. And I was like, I don't know which team I'm going to put as 31, but it just felt like a 31-27 game all week long. So I ended up going with Arkansas. I do kind of have this feeling South Carolina is going to play a good bit better today. I think they're going to look more efficient on offense, but it's just hard for me to predict them to win a road game. They didn't play that well on the road last year. They didn't start fast on the road last year. You know, you talked about keys to the game earlier, key players. In general, you got to start faster. Like they started very slow on the road last year. So for me, I just can't pick them to win it until I see a little bit more. They have not done well on the road against SEC West teams in general, like the last, I don't know how long. So, and it's a ranked team. Somebody out there tell me the last time South Carolina beat a ranked SEC West team on the road. I don't remember off the top of my head. So that's it. Kendall, your thoughts?
I'm right there with you. I mean, I'm usually the one that tries to be positive, but I just can't sit here and say like with full confidence that I think South Carolina is going to win this game. Do I think they can stay in the game? Do I think they can win the game? Yes, I do. But when I'm making a score prediction, I cannot say with full confidence that I know the offensive line is going to be able to create space, open up the run game. I can't say that because I haven't seen that. And when you're facing the number 16 team in the country on the road for noon game, you got to get up early. Like there's a lot of factors in this that make it really hard, right? But I do think South Carolina has the ability to win. I think they have the keys to win. They just have to put it together. They have the talent. It just needs to come together at this point. So I think I have the score 27-17 Arkansas. I do think South Carolina can hang tough. Like I said, I think they could win the game, but they're going to have to play great football on all sides of the ball. I think everybody knows that, but this is not the game for pre-snap penalties. They've got to win the turnover margin. Like it's the little things. It's the special teams moments where South Carolina is going to have to come through because Arkansas is a way, way harder opponent than Georgia State. No disrespect to Georgia State, but it's the truth.
Do you have Georgia State beating North Carolina today?
I do.
Yes.
Carolina's defense is not.
Yes, we are both there. But hey, by the way, Kendall, I don't think the picks have. our records on them. We got to add that for the picks aren't going to be any fun if we don't know what our records are predicting games.
I think last week I did pretty good.
I
Although I
did.
did pick App to win.
So did
and
I. I picked the App. I picked Utah, I think.
I picked
And
Utah.
so I went into this week, Kendall. I was like, just pick the favorites. Just pick the favorites. Just pick the favorites. And then because I had such a bad week last week, and then I got ready to send them in, and I was like, nope. I'm picking Kentucky to beat Florida. I'm picking Georgia State to beat North Carolina, and then I just went off the rails. But yeah, we've got to have our records on there. But anyway,
I do think Georgia State will beat North Carolina. I mean, people could
and it's
go
in
watch
Georgia State too.
yeah, it's in Georgia State. Like people could come watch this video in 8 hours and be like, "You're so wrong." But North Carolina's defense was not
trash.
That was like a basketball game. App State in North Carolina last
40
week.
points in a quarter.
Yeah, it was not the best defensive showing I've ever seen. But yeah, today, South Carolina facing Arkansas, noon Eastern time, 11 local time. Wes, any final thoughts before we get out of here? Do you want to address Gamecock Nation? Tell them, even if South Carolina loses this game, things can still be okay for the Gamecocks. And I'm not setting like South Carolina up for failure. I'm really not. I just, realistic expectations.
I'm not going to preach to them today, Kendall. We're going to send them out into the world to fend for themselves. I'm not going to preach. We're going to have plenty to talk about on the after the sandstorm because I'm getting to do after the sandstorm this time. So final thought is, man, KJ Jefferson is good. He's big, but the thing that caught my attention is how quick he is for his size. They were talking last week on the broadcast. He's listed like 242, I think. He's lost some weight. He's actually more like 230. So, but he's added some quickness, some ability to make you miss. Open field tackling for both teams. Massive key, in my opinion, going into this game. So on both sides. I don't know. That's what I got. It'll be interesting. We'll have plenty to talk about after, Kendall.
One more little tidbit about Jefferson. He is the SEC's leading returning rusher at the quarterback position. So another reason for South Carolina's defense to step up and to perform. And they did that last year several times. And then I think last week they still looked really, really good. So it's going to be a game for sure. It's an early one. I hope that y'all are doing okay out there, starting your tailgates early if you're tailgating, parties. I don't know what y'all are doing out there. I'm personally going back to sleep in between now and the game because I'm in Charlotte right now. I'm working for the night. So it's been a long couple days. But noon game means you get the rest of your night. And then it's a little like next week you got to get ready for getting up even earlier in Columbia when South Carolina plays Georgia. So
1 week at a time though, Kendall.
What?
1 week at a time.
Yeah, I'm just saying like that prep for like getting up because getting up from the noon game it's
a different battle.
It's tough.
Yes.
But y'all stay safe out there today. Be sure to follow us over on GamecockCentral.com. Colin Taylor in Fayetteville, Arkansas. He's going to do a great job holding down the fort, keeping you updated. Wes and I are going to be back after the game for After the Sandstorm to recap what we saw from South Carolina. It's going to be a big day, huge opportunity for the Gamecocks to have a statement win to kick off the season. If South Carolina can win this game, it's going to get Gamecock Nation so excited, and it's going to set the table very well for them heading into the next few weeks. So you can catch it with kickoff set for noon Eastern time, 11 local time from Fayetteville, Arkansas. Week 2, South Carolina against the number 16 ranked Arkansas Razorbacks. He's Wes Mitchell. I'm Kendall Smith. This has been Before the Sandstorm. Have a great day, everybody.